Hey guys, I just wanted to throw something together to provide some, instruction on story time. So, as you know, when we're in Europe, each of you will act as our kind of tour guide and come up in front of the group and tell the story about the place or topic or work of art that you had selected to, study or look into. And these presentations, for lack of a better word, are about 4 minutes in length. No notes allowed, so they're kind of extemporaneous. But the hardest thing, I think the greatest challenge that you will have on Storytime is not like learning about your topic or kind of researching it or whatever. But the greatest challenge will be figuring out how to turn it into a story. These are not meant to be presentations in the traditional sense where you're just kind of delivering a list of names, dates, and facts. It's meant to be more compelling. It's meant to be something of a human interest story. So let me share with you some examples to illustrate what these are meant to look like. So Patrick's topic here was this extraordinary memorial that calls to mind the persecution of the LGBTQ community in Germany during the Nazi era. It's located here in Munich, and he's standing pretty much in the middle of this memorial. It's this embedded memorial across the street that goes off to the distance of this image. It's these green, blue, and red planks. And no doubt you're aware, of course, how when you consider Nazi victimhood, there were a great many groups who were targeted for Nazi hatred. Jews, of course, the mentally and physically disabled, the Roma and the Sinti, or who are commonly referred to as gypsies, communists, and others. But the homosexual community was, in fact, one of the first to be targeted by the Nazi government. So let's take a look at Patrick's story here.
Okay, so October 20th, 1934 was a normal day for most in Germany, but the events to come as darkness fell that evening would change a lot of people's lives forever.
So I want to pause here for a moment and play this again. And I want to ask you to pay particular attention to how he begins his story.
Okay, so October 20th, 1934 was a normal day for most in Germany, but the events to come as darkness fell that evening would change a lot of people's lives forever.
So you can see right away that Patrick is not giving a presentation. He really is telling a story. And like all good stories, his has a really good opening. He uses this opening line to, kind of paint a picture or introduce a moment of tension. And he's focusing really on people, and he's telling a very human story. So his opening line says, October 20th, 1934 was a normal day for most in Germany. But the events to come as darkness fell that evening would change a lot of people's lives forever. Clearly, with this opening line, he's showing us that this is a story of some consequence. He's telling us a story that matters. And he doesn't begin by explaining what this memorial is. He takes his time to kind of set the stage. Now, watch what he does after his opening line.
Okay, so October 20th, 1934 was a normal day for most in Germany, but the events to come as darkness fell that evening would change a lot of people's lives forever. So, what is the significance of this night? So imagine you're sitting in a bar and having some drinks with your friends, and then a whole police force swarms your bar and orders you to stand up and walk outside and stay there until further instruction. This happened on this very street corner. This used to be the Schwarzfischer, and that was a gay bar, and it was raided on October 20th of 1934. Um, so, and Germany is known to be the home of the first homosexual movement, which rose due to.
So you can see, even after that great opening line, he's just continuing with his story. He's not then immediately jumping in and explaining what this memorial is. Again, he's kind of setting the stage. And this is actually all really good storytelling technique or strategy. So he starts with, like a hook. Instead of just like listing facts like a textbook overloaded, as it says there, with like, names, dates, and facts. And he's telling a very human story. So he's not really talking about the memorial or the place. He's talking about individuals and the plight that they faced. The way he tells the story builds, interest, a kind of attention or meaning. He's getting us to think about, why this story matters, what's at stake, right? And I like how he uses the place around him. So he sets up the story, and then he says, this happened right here on this corner. So he's telling the story about how the Nazi persecution of the homosexual community began with a raid on a well-known gay bar in downtown Munich. That, again, was right there at this corner. So he saves that little detail of his story until he has kind of set up the line, if you will. And again, he's not telling us about the memorial until the scene is set. If I had continued playing his story, you would see him eventually drift towards actually talking about the memorial itself and some of its particular, symbolism. You can also see that he has not memorized a script. Please do not do that. That makes for really bad storytelling, and it's hard to do that anyway. He knows the story he wants to tell, and he's just telling it. And again, had I kept the scene going, you would see how he really kind of wraps up his story with a few words about what this all means and why it's important. So let me share with you then a point of contrast. So this is a presentation given by another student years ago, also in Munich. His topic was the building behind him called the Feldherrnhalle, which is a Bavarian war memorial. Now, to his defense, the students were really not asked way back then to tell a story. They were instructed to give a presentation, and that's exactly what he does. Watch this.
All right, so this is Feldherrnhalle. It was, construction started in 1841. It was ordered by King Ludwig. It was finished in 1844, and this is a Bavarian Army memorial. So the middle statue is just a sort of general statue, like.
So his opening line, right? This is the Feldherrnhalle. He then says, construction started in 1841. It was ordered by King Ludwig. It was finished in 1844. This is a Bavarian war memorial. Now, it's just all about like who, where, why, when. It's names, dates, and facts. This is more of a formal presentation, and you can see how much it contrasts with the manner in which Patrick started his story. I mean, it's just a very different tone. And I think you can see from this illustration how I moved away from asking students to give a presentation and instead to tell a story. It's so much more interesting for the listener. And I should say it's more interesting for the storyteller as well. So, just to summarize some of these points, right? How to be a good storyteller. So again, first, it needs a really good start. Something that's going to, not like grab their attention, but just something interesting, to say the least. And the best way to do that is to say something that, introduces some tension, paints a picture, as it says there. Secondly, make it a human story, not just about talking about a building or a place. As it says, build tension or meaning. And then fourthly, use the the place around you to tell your story. And then, end with purpose. What's the takeaway? Why does this story matter? Why is it interesting? And then some things to avoid would be, again, memorizing a script or overloading or listing facts like a textbook, or again, like speaking in monotone. So, as I said at the beginning, the hardest thing I think sometimes the hardest thing for you guys is to find a way to turn this into a story. And that's just up to your own creativity, right? So have fun with it. Patrick's topic is a heavy one. The Nazi persecution of the homosexual community is a devastating story. Many of the topics, however, are much more lighthearted, and you can really have fun with your story if you want. But just enjoy it. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions.